I want you to imagine something for me. Imagine spending 11 years of your life loving someone. Not the easy kind of love, not the kind where everything is perfect and painless. I mean the real kind. The kind where you wake up at 3 in the morning when he has a fever and you don't even think twice about it. The kind where you cancel plans with your best friends because he wants you home. The kind where you shrink yourself, your dreams, your voice, your needs, smaller and smaller year after year, just to fit inside the shape of someone else's life. Now imagine that on the night of your own birthday, the one night a year that is supposed to belong to you, that same man grabs your wrists, drags you to a beam in the corner of a rented venue, ties your hands above your head, and whips you 30 times with his belt, in front of your friends, in front of your family, in front of everyone who ever watched you smile at his side and thought, what a beautiful couple. And the reason? A glass of red wine accidentally splashed onto another woman's white dress. A woman who, as I would discover exactly 5 minutes later, had been sleeping with my husband for the past 2 years. My name is Rachel Calloway. I'm 36 years old. I live in Austin, Texas. And what I'm about to tell you is the most painful and ultimately the most freeing story of my life. I met Marcus when I was 24. He walked into the coffee shop where I worked on a Thursday morning in September, wearing a navy blue jacket and carrying a laptop bag that was half unzipped with papers practically falling out of it. He looked completely disorganized and slightly panicked, and when he reached the counter, he said, "Large coffee, please, the strongest thing you have, and maybe a small prayer if you've got one." I laughed. He smiled. And that was it. That was the moment my whole life tilted sideways. We talked every morning for 3 weeks before he finally asked for my number. He was thoughtful like that, unhurried, careful. He showed up consistently before he ever asked for anything. By October, we were spending weekends together exploring bookstores and farmers markets in South Austin. By December, he told me I was the first person in his life who made quiet feel comfortable. He proposed on a Tuesday evening in our apartment. No grand gesture. No audience. Just Marcus on one knee in our kitchen, pasta boiling on the stove, holding out a simple gold ring with a small oval diamond. His hands were shaking. He said, "Rachel, I know I'm not perfect, but I swear to God, I will spend every day of my life trying to be the man you deserve." I was crying before he even got to the end of the sentence. We got married the following June. Small outdoor ceremony in the Texas Hill Country. String lights wrapped around cedar trees, wildflowers everywhere. My mom cried. His mom cried. His dad, a man I had never once seen show emotion, quietly wiped his eye during the vows and looked away. That was the Marcus I married. The changes didn't come all at once. That's the cruelest part. Nobody warns you that a person can transform so gradually that by the time you finally see it, you've already been living in the dark for years. The first time Marcus spoke to me with real contempt in his voice was about 3 years into our marriage. He'd had a brutal week at his firm. He was a corporate attorney, always under pressure. And I'd said something small and harmless at dinner. I don't even remember what. And he looked at me with this cold, flat expression and said, "Do you ever think before you open your mouth?" I went to the bathroom and cried quietly so he wouldn't hear me. He apologized the next morning. Flowers from the HEB on the corner. A long hug. The whole performance. I forgave him. I told myself stress does things to people. I told myself I knew who he really was. But by year 5, the apologies started getting shorter. By year 7, they stopped coming altogether. I learned to read Marcus the way you learn to read bad weather in Texas, fast-moving, unpredictable, and capable of turning violent without much warning. I learned which topics to avoid. I learned which moods meant I should stay quiet. I learned how to make myself invisible inside my own home. And still, I stayed. Because I had made a promise. Because I believed in the man I had married. Because somewhere underneath all the coldness and the cruelty, I was convinced that the Marcus who proposed to me in our kitchen with shaking hands still existed. I just needed to find him again. What I didn't know was that while I was searching for him, he had already given himself, completely, privately, deliberately, to someone else. The birthday party was Marcus's idea. And that alone should have made me suspicious. In 11 years of marriage, the man had never planned so much as a dinner reservation for my birthday. He always said he wasn't a party person. He said crowds drained him. So when he came home one evening in early April and said he wanted to throw me a real birthday celebration, a proper party, a rented venue, catered food, our closest friends and family. I was genuinely moved. I put my hand on his face and thought, we're turning a corner. He's trying. He smiled and said, you deserve to be celebrated, Rachel. The party was held on the last Saturday in April. 40 guests. A gorgeous venue in East Austin with exposed brick walls, Edison bulb lighting, and long wooden tables decorated with white candles and pale pink roses. I wore a gold dress. My hair was done. I felt beautiful. I walked in smiling, completely unaware that somewhere across that room, a woman in a white dress was waiting. And that one accidental moment with a wine glass was about to detonate the carefully constructed lie that my entire marriage had been built on. What happened in the next 5 minutes would tear my world completely apart and reveal a betrayal so deep, I almost didn't make it to the other side. The party started beautifully. And that's the thing that haunts me even now, how normal everything looked. How warm the lighting was. How the laughter floated through the room like nothing in the world was wrong. How Marcus stood near the entrance greeting guests with that easy smile of his. The one that used to make my heart flip when we first met. The one I had spent years trying to earn back. People hugged me. They handed me cards and small gifts. My best friend Diane, who had driven all the way from Houston, pulled me into a long embrace and whispered, girl, you look absolutely stunning tonight. My mother was already on her second glass of champagne, glowing happy, telling anyone who would listen that her daughter had the most wonderful husband for putting all of this together. I believed it too. For the first hour, I genuinely believed it. Marcus stayed close to me most of the evening, closer than he'd been in months, actually. His hand on the small of my back. A kiss on my cheek when people were watching. The kind of attentiveness that felt almost foreign after years of distance, but that I was too grateful to question. This is real, I kept telling myself. He planned all of this for you. He loves you. You were right to stay. I smiled until my cheeks hurt. It was around the 90-minute mark that I first noticed her. She was standing near the far end of the room by the bar, holding a glass of white wine, talking to one of Marcus's colleagues from his firm. She was tall, maybe 5'9", with long dark hair and a white fitted dress that looked expensive. Not the kind of expensive that shouts. The quiet kind. The kind that just fits differently than regular clothes. I didn't know her. That was the first thing that struck me as odd. Marcus had handled the guest list entirely himself, and I had assumed it was all people we both knew, friends, family, colleagues I recognized. But this woman's face was completely unfamiliar to me. I leaned toward Diane and nodded subtly in that direction. Do you know who that is? I asked. Diane squinted. Never seen her before. Maybe someone from Marcus's office. I let it go. It was a party. Marcus worked with a lot of people. It wasn't unusual for him to invite a colleague I hadn't met. But somewhere in the back of my mind, in that quiet, small place that women learn to ignore because we were told we were being paranoid, something flickered. I watched her, just for a moment. And then I watched Marcus. And for just a fraction of a second, before he looked away, I saw him glance in her direction with an expression that wasn't professional courtesy. It was something else entirely. But I pushed it down. It was my birthday. I was wearing a gold dress. My mother was happy. I was not going to do this to myself tonight. The moment it happened was so fast. I was crossing the room to get to the dessert table. They had a 3-tiered birthday cake, white frosting with gold detailing. And I remember thinking how beautiful it was when someone stepped back from the bar without looking. It was her. We collided at almost exactly the same moment. My right hand was holding a glass of red wine, a Cabernet that one of the waitstaff had just handed me. And when her shoulder hit mine, the glass tipped. I grabbed for it. I missed. The wine went everywhere. Most of it landed directly on the front of her white dress. Time seemed to slow down in that horrible, stomach-dropping way it does when you've just done something that cannot be undone. The red spread across the white fabric in a wide, blooming stain, and for a full second neither of us moved. Oh my God, I breathed. I am so sorry. I'm so sorry. That was completely my fault. Let me get some napkins. But she wasn't looking at me. She was looking past me. And the expression on her face wasn't embarrassment or annoyance. It was something closer to fear. I turned around. Marcus was already moving toward us from across the room. And the look on his face stopped the words in my throat. I had seen Marcus angry before. I had seen him cold, dismissive, cutting. But what I saw walking toward me in that moment was something I had never seen on his face in 11 years of marriage. It was rage. Pure, white hot, completely undisguised rage. Not directed at the situation, directed at me. Marcus, I started. He didn't say a word. He grabbed both of my wrists. The room didn't go quiet all at once. It happened in a ripple, conversations faltering, heads turning, laughter dying, as people began to register what was happening. I heard Diane say my name somewhere behind me. I heard my mother make a sound I had never heard her make before. Marcus pulled me toward the corner of the room where a thick decorative ceiling beam ran parallel to the wall. There was a metal hook, decorative, I had thought when I first saw it. Some kind of industrial aesthetic detail. And before I fully understood what was happening, he had looped something around my wrists and I was stretched upward, standing on my toes, arms above my head. He took off his belt. Marcus, please. 30, he said quietly, like it was a number he had already decided on before tonight. And then he started. I would survive those 30 seconds. But what Diane whispered in my ear the moment Marcus finally walked away, that was the thing I almost didn't survive at all. There are moments in life that split your timeline in two. Before and after. Everything that happened to me in the weeks and months that followed that birthday party falls into the after category. And I can tell you with complete certainty that the woman who walked into that venue wearing a gold dress and smiling, she never really came back out. What came out instead was someone different. Someone harder. Someone who had finally stopped lying to herself. But I'm getting ahead of the story. Let me take you back to the moment Marcus walked away. There is a difference between being broken and being done. I had been broken before. Plenty of times. Every cold dismissal, every cutting remark, every night I cried quietly in the bathroom so Marcus wouldn't hear me. Those had broken me, piece by piece, over the course of years. But sitting on that bathroom floor with my back against the cold tile, reading those emails on the family iPad, that wasn't brokenness. That was the sound of something snapping shut. A door closing. A decision being made. I stood up, smoothed my gold dress, looked at myself in the mirror one final time. Okay, Rachel, I said quietly to my own reflection. Now you know exactly where you stand. And then I started thinking clearly for the first time in years. The email I had found, the one dated 3 weeks before the party, wasn't a love letter. It wasn't flirtatious or romantic. It was transactional. Cold. Written in the clipped, precise language of a man who had spent 15 years practicing law and knew exactly how to say things without technically saying them. The subject line was, "Timeline, let's confirm." Marcus had written, "If everything goes according to plan by end of April, the process should be straightforward. Make sure you're present. Your being there matters for what comes next." Vanessa had replied, "Understood. I'll be there. Are you certain she won't suspect anything beforehand?" Marcus, "She never does." I read those 3 words 4 times. She never does. 11 years. And that was his summary of me. His quiet, private assessment of the woman he had married. A woman so trusting, so willfully blind, so desperate to believe the best of him, that she could be maneuvered and manipulated without ever seeing it coming. He wasn't wrong. I hadn't seen it coming, but he had made a critical mistake. He had underestimated what I would do once I did. I unlocked the bathroom door and walked back into the party. To anyone watching, I looked composed. Calm. Perhaps a little quieter than before. But it was my birthday, and I had just been publicly humiliated. A little quiet was understandable. Nobody would look twice. I found Diane near the dessert table, pretending to examine the birthday cake with the focused attention of a woman who was actually watching the entire room over her shoulder. "I need you to do something for me," I said, keeping my voice low and even. "And I need you to do it without asking questions right now." She looked at me for 1 second. Read my face. Nodded. "Whatever you need. I need you to go to Marcus's laptop bag. It's in the coat check room near the entrance, the brown leather one. Inside the front zip pocket, there should be a manila folder. He had it on the kitchen counter this morning, and he was very specific about bringing it tonight. I need to know what's in it." Diane didn't hesitate. She set down her plate and walked casually toward the entrance. I turned and found Marcus. He was standing with a group of his colleagues near the bar, drink in hand, completely at ease. He caught my across the room and something passed over his face. Not guilt, not remorse. Something more like assessment. like he was checking the status of a situation he believed he had fully under control. I smiled at him. Not a warm smile. Not a forgiving smile. The kind of smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. And I watched his expression flicker with the faintest trace of uncertainty before he smiled back. Good, I thought. Start wondering. Diane was back in 4 minutes. She pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand as she passed me, leaning close to whisper, Rachel, whatever is on that paper, just breathe before you react. I unfolded it in the corner of the room, angled away from the crowd. It was a printed email confirmation from a divorce attorney. Marcus had already retained legal counsel 3 weeks ago. The consultation had been scheduled, the retainer paid, and according to the confirmation, the grounds listed were irreconcilable differences. But that wasn't the part that took the air out of my lungs. At the bottom of the confirmation, in the section marked Additional Notes, someone had handwritten 4 words in Marcus's unmistakable block print. Remove her. Keep everything. Our house, paid with a down payment from my inheritance from my grandmother, was in Marcus's name alone. He had suggested that arrangement early in our marriage, for tax purposes, and I had agreed because I trusted him completely. Our joint savings account had been quietly and methodically drained over the past 14 months. I had noticed the balance dropping, but Marcus had always had an explanation. Investments. Business expenses. He had been preparing this for over a year. The party wasn't a celebration. It was a distraction. A final public performance designed to establish, in front of 40 witnesses, that he had been a loving, attentive husband right up until the end. And the scene he had made with me, the humiliation, the rage, that was designed to establish something else entirely. Grounds to make me look unstable, unpredictable, difficult. He had planned every single detail, except one. He had no idea that 3 weeks before the party, I had found something in our home that gave me far more power than any attorney or any asset, and that everything he thought he was about to take from me was already, quietly, beyond his reach. The room was silent in that horrible, suspended way, the kind of silence that isn't peaceful at all, but instead feels like the whole world holding its breath. 40 people stood frozen, champagne glasses forgotten in hands, conversations dead mid-sentence. My mother was somewhere behind me, and I could hear her crying softly. And that sound, cut through me deeper than anything else in that moment. Marcus straightened his jacket, turned, and walked calmly toward the bar like nothing had happened. Like I wasn't standing there humiliated in front of everyone I loved. Diane reached me first. She was at my side in seconds, her hands on my face, her voice low and urgent. Rachel. Rachel, look at me. I looked at her. Her eyes were glassy, but her jaw was set, that expression I'd seen on her face before. The one that meant she was holding something in because this was not the time and place. But the time and place was coming very soon. I need to tell you something, she whispered. And I need you to stay calm when I do. Diane. That woman. She glanced briefly toward the corner where the woman in the white dress had retreated, being attended to by one of the waitstaff. Her name is Vanessa Cole. She's a junior partner at Marcus's firm. I stared at her. How do you know that? Because, Diane said, dropping her voice even lower, 6 months ago, a friend of mine who works downtown told me she had seen Marcus having dinner with a woman matching that exact description. Twice. At Uki, you know, the nice one on Lamar. Not a work dinner, Rachel. The kind with candles and wine and his hand on hers across the table. The room tilted. Why didn't you tell me? My voice came out smaller than I intended. Her eyes filled. Because I wasn't sure. Because I didn't want to blow up your marriage on a rumor. Because every time I almost said something, you seemed, I don't know, like you were finally doing okay, and I couldn't. She stopped. Pressed her lips together. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I didn't cry. That surprised me, honestly. I had expected the tears to come immediately. That waterfall of grief that hits you when something devastating lands. But instead, I felt something else. Something that started low in my chest and spread outward slowly, like ice forming over still water. Clarity. I looked across the room at Marcus. He was laughing at something his colleague had said, drink in hand, completely relaxed. And then I looked at Vanessa Cole, who had a club soda pressed to the wine stain on her dress and was speaking quietly into her phone with her back half turned to the room. And right then, in that specific moment, a detail clicked into place that I hadn't let myself examine before. Marcus had planned this party. Marcus, who had never once organized a celebration for me in 11 years. Marcus, who had personally handled the guest list. Marcus, who had chosen this venue, these decorations, this guest list, and had personally invited Vanessa Cole to my birthday party. She wasn't here by accident. She was here deliberately. The question was, why? I excused myself from Diane and walked, calmly, carefully, to the restroom. I locked the door. I stood in front of the mirror and looked at myself for a long moment. Gold dress. Hair still perfect. Mascara somehow still intact. And then I took out my phone. I had never gone through Marcus's phone or email before. Not once in 11 years. I had always considered that kind of thing a violation. A line you didn't cross unless you wanted to become someone you didn't recognize. But Marcus had left his laptop bag in our bedroom that morning. And before we left for the venue, I had seen him pull up his email to check something work-related. He had been distracted and left the browser open. I hadn't looked then. I was looking now. Remotely. Through the shared family iPad that was still logged into his Google account. It took me 4 minutes. 4 minutes to find 2 years of emails. Private threads hidden under a folder labeled simply V. The oldest email in the thread was dated March 3rd, 2 years and 1 month ago. Last night was everything. I don't know how to go back to pretending after this. It was signed with a small letter V. Marcus's response, sent 11 minutes later. You don't have to pretend with me. Only with her. I was her. I had been her for 2 years. I sat on the floor of that bathroom with my back against the cold tile wall, phone in my hands, and I read every single email in that folder. Every one. Some made me want to weep. Some made me want to scream. But one near the bottom, dated just 3 weeks ago, made the blood drain completely from my face. Because it wasn't a love letter. It was a plan. Marcus hadn't thrown me this party to celebrate me. He had thrown it for a reason I hadn't even begun to imagine. And the proof was right there in black and white on the screen in my hands. They say the best revenge is living well. I used to think that was something people said to make themselves feel better about doing nothing. A comforting phrase for people who had been wronged and had no other options. A way of dressing up defeat as dignity. I don't believe that anymore. Because what I learned, in the weeks and months that followed that birthday party, is that living well isn't passive. It isn't quiet. It isn't simply smiling and moving on while the person who hurt you walks away untouched. Living well, real living well, means making sure the truth comes out. Every single piece of it. Let me take you back 3 weeks before the party. Because that's where the real story begins. Marcus had always been careful with his personal documents. Locked filing cabinet in his home office. Password-protected laptop. A level of privacy that I had always respected and never questioned. But 3 weeks before my birthday, he left for an early morning run and forgot to close his office door, something he never did. I walked past and saw the filing cabinet open. I don't know what made me stop. Instinct, maybe. That quiet inner voice I had been ignoring for years finally refusing to be ignored any longer. I stood in the doorway for a full 30 seconds before I walked in. What I found changed everything. Inside the cabinet, beneath a folder of case documents, was a separate folder with no label. Inside it were financial statements, personal ones, not joint. Accounts I had never seen before, in Marcus's name only. And the balances in those accounts told a story that made the room spin around me. Over the past 14 months, Marcus had been quietly transferring money. Not small amounts. Significant ones. Our joint savings steadily drained. The equity line on the house drawn down. Redirected into 2 private accounts that I had no knowledge of and no access to. He wasn't just planning to leave me. He was planning to leave me with nothing. But here is the thing about being married to an attorney for 11 years. You learn things. You absorb things. You sit across the dinner table from a man while he talks about cases and strategies and legal mechanisms. And even when you're not paying close attention, you're paying attention. I photographed every document in that folder. And then I called my own attorney. Her name was Patricia Ongwain, a family law attorney based in downtown Austin with a reputation, as Diane had once described her, for being absolutely immovable when she decides to fight. I had found her number 3 months earlier during one of those late nights when I couldn't sleep and found myself quietly, almost unconsciously, typing things into Google that I wasn't ready to admit I was thinking. I had never called her Until that morning. Patricia listened to everything without interrupting. When I finished, there was a brief silence. Mrs. Calloway, she said, what you've just described is dissipation of marital assets. That is not just grounds for divorce. That is grounds for a very significant financial remedy in your favor. How soon can you come in? I was in her office by noon. By the time Marcus's own attorney filed the first paperwork, the week after the birthday party, Patricia had already spent 3 weeks building a case that was, in her words, airtight. The house that was in Marcus's name alone, purchased with my inheritance. Patricia had the paper trail going back 11 years. Under Texas law, the argument for reimbursement was strong. The drained joint accounts. Every transfer documented. Every date recorded. Every dollar traceable. Marcus had spent over a year carefully constructing a trap. He just hadn't realized that I had already found the blueprint. The divorce proceedings took 7 months. Marcus walked in on the first day with his attorney looking confident. He walked out of the final hearing looking like a man who had just discovered that the chess game he thought he was winning had been decided 3 moves before he even sat down. The court ruled in my favor on the asset dissipation claim. The private accounts were factored into the settlement. The marital home was awarded to me, with full documentation of my inheritance contribution on record. The drained joint savings were accounted for in the final division. He didn't get to keep everything. He didn't get to keep much at all. Vanessa Cole, I later learned, had quietly resigned from his firm 2 months into the proceedings. Whatever picture Marcus had painted for her of their future together, I suspect it looked considerably different once the financial reality of his situation became clear. I heard through mutual friends that he had moved into a 1-bedroom apartment on the east side of town. I heard he was struggling. I didn't celebrate that. I want to be honest about that. There was no moment where I pumped my fist or felt a surge of joy at his misery. What I felt was something quieter, something that took longer to arrive but settled deeper once it did. Relief. The specific relief of a woman who has finally put down something very heavy that she carried for far too long. I still live in Austin. Still in the same house, actually. The one with the big oak tree in the backyard that I always loved and Marcus never noticed. I repainted the bedroom. I planted a garden. I sleep in the middle of the bed now, and I leave the bathroom light on at night if I want to, and nobody says a word about it. Bayan comes to visit every few months. We drink wine on the back porch and talk for hours, and sometimes we don't talk at all, and that is perfectly fine too. I am 36 years old. I have my whole life in front of me. And every single morning when I wake up in that house, my house, I think about something Patricia said to me on the very last day of the proceedings, when we were walking out of the courthouse into the sharp, clean Austin sunlight. She looked at me and said, "You know what won this case, Rachel? Not the documents. Not the financial records. You won this case the moment you stopped doubting what you already knew." I think about that a lot. I think about all the women who are right now tonight, lying awake in the dark next to someone who is slowly, quietly, methodically building a life without them, while they lie there shrinking themselves, doubting themselves, telling themselves they're being paranoid. To every single one of those women, I want to say this: you are not paranoid. You're not too sensitive. You are not the problem. Trust that quiet voice. Find your Patricia Ungwayne. Photograph the documents. And never, never let anyone convince you that you deserve anything less than a love that doesn't require you to disappear. My name is Rachel Calloway. I walked into a party as someone's punchline. I walked out as my own beginning.